Welcome. This is your host, Rakim Sabri, and here is another episode of Financially Irresponsible. Today, I want to tackle a couple of different topics, namely the non-participation in financial system by marginalized communities, the overuse of the term financial trauma, which I'm sure you guys will probably find ironic, and we're going to do a case study of a real life experience or real life situation of an individual who I'm working with. I thought that it would be interesting to kind of add this shade in these shows where you guys get to see real life examples of what financial trauma and financial stress and maybe a lack of financial education look like at different stages based off of these clients that I work with. And I'm not going to be using any specific names to protect the identity of these individuals, but I'm sure that some of these experiences that the individuals are having will resonate with you. And so if we have enough time, we will cover that as well. But jumping right in, I want to start with the overuse of the term financial trauma. So one of the things that I've noticed is that financial trauma, like financial literacy before it, has become a buzz phrase in the media. Everybody's talking about it everywhere you turn. And I certainly cannot state claim of being the first person to ever use this phrase, but I've used it quite a lot, have positioned myself somewhat as an expert on the topic. And one of the things that I'm noticing is how its misuse is actually going to do or doing more harm than it is good, because it's confusing people about what it is. And there's also kind of the promise of some solve of financial trauma from individuals who are not especially trained or who have not spent a significant amounts of time in understanding how do you define, how do you identify, and how do you work through financial trauma. And so we want to be careful about how we assign language to these outcomes, to these experiences, because when you break up the word financial trauma, one of the pretty prominent parts of that phrase is the trauma piece, right? And if people are not trauma informed in understanding how cycling through or helping people to relive trauma without being able to guide them through that experience, what you're doing is actually causing harm to the individual because they're re-traumatizing themselves, or you are facilitating the re-traumatization of that individual by bringing up these traumas and not providing solutions. And so when we look at kind of like the melding of the worlds, right, of personal finance, which is marked by its being personal, and trauma, or some kind of mental, emotional reaction to a situation that more likely than not was negative, it creates a very powerful kind of combination of events that individuals reflect on and kind of have to sit with and ultimately relive through memory, because our brains don't have the ability to distinguish between the moment that trauma was experienced and the memory of that trauma. And so without the proper education on how to guide people through that, without sensitivities to what caused that, and when in instances like workshops or interviews or articles where you're making people kind of kick up all of that mental and emotional anguish without being able to provide them with a solution, what you're doing is basically taking a bottle full of bees and shaking it up and releasing it out into the world, right? You're causing people to get riled up and then sending them out into the world without any solutions, without any answers, and just a lot of frustration. And so one of the things that I want to kind of champion as I champion this cause around understanding financial trauma and understanding the impact and intersection of money and mental health is that I don't want to say leave the work to the trained professionals, but that we are conscious of how what we do and what we say and what we approach can have a negative impact on individuals. So I have participated in workshops, I've watched interviews, I've read articles, I've listened to podcasts where the guest or the host is introducing this phrase to their audience without a proper understanding of all that comes with it. And I will raise my hand as well as being somebody who once upon a time thought that they came up with the phrase financial trauma. I mistakenly thought when I first started using the term financial trauma that I came up with the word or that I came up with the phrase until I got in and around people who had been doing work in the financial counseling and financial planning and financial therapy space for decades. And financial therapy is a relatively new discipline. So there's new learnings every single day around how to apply financial therapy, around how to identify the psychological factors of how our behavior works with finances, around how those things interface with each other when we look at culture, when we look at religion, when we look at race, when we look at socioeconomic status. All of these variables come into play when we're talking about how money shows up and its significance in our lives and our behaviors. And so when I look at some of the misinformation that's being circulated around financial trauma, it kind of makes me cringe a little bit, because when I think about the potential harm that it's doing, or the way that financial trauma is being used to rope in audiences for a specific outcome, whether that be getting numbers of people in seats, whether that be signing people up for programs, signing people up for this coaching or mentorship or whatever. And I am a financial coach, so I certainly lead with financial trauma. I find that a lot of the misinformation dilutes the good information, and people are left feeling unsatisfied, angry, frustrated, and again, re-traumatized. And so I just wanted to take this time to talk about how important it is for us to be careful with how we assign language, particularly in this space that's so delicate and involves people's mental and emotional well-being, their behaviors, and actions as it relates to money. And for those of you who have not heard of my definition of financial trauma, because there are a lot of definitions in circulation, I define financial trauma as any instance observed or experienced that has a negative impact on the way that you view, interact with, or believe about money. And so that is not you just having a bad day financially. That is not you just making one bad decision financially. It's not an instance of I'm just experiencing financial stress right now. It is so much more complicated, so much more complex. And the more I learn about financial trauma, certainly the more I share about financial trauma, and I realize that there are a lot of people out there who are not authentic in their delivery of this content, or not educated enough in their delivery of this content. So be careful who you listen to, folks. Do your own research. If you are an educator using financial trauma, please focus on the trauma-informed approach to educating people and understanding how you may be triggering them and how you want to de-escalate the emotions and the responses. If you are somebody on the side of the audience who is hearing somebody talk about financial trauma, be conscious of how these conversations, these lessons, these interviews, these excerpts are triggering you, and take the proper steps to de-escalate those feelings, because even if they are not showing up or you're not reacting to those feelings in the foreground, certainly they can be brewing behind the scenes in the background. So moving on to the next part of our segment, I want to talk about non-participation in financial systems. So in another episode, I talked about the mistrust that marginalized communities, primarily Black and brown communities, have with financial institutions and what those financial institutions can do to regain trust with those populations. I attended a workshop recently where, ironically, we're talking about some mental health factors, we're talking about some socioeconomic factors, we were talking about some educational factors, and some information was presented that implied that people in marginalized communities do not participate in financial systems because of a lack of financial literacy. And ironically, in the same week, a clip circulated on social media of a well-known comedian making a similar statement. And the statement went something to the effect of, people in those communities don't have the intelligence or aren't smart enough to open up bank accounts based off of the fact that they're in those environments. And what is common in both of those instances, and my reflection publicly in both of those instances has been, is that there are people who willfully choose to not participate in financial systems, who willfully choose not to open up bank accounts, who willfully choose not to use credit cards, who willfully choose to put their money underneath a mattress or in a drawer or behind a pillowcase somewhere because of experiences that they have either had directly, where financial systems, financial institutions have wronged them, have taken their money, or they know somebody who has had that experience. And because of the proximity to that experience, because there's somebody that they can talk to, somebody who can tell them like, hey, I had my money in the bank and I lost all of my money, or I had my money in the bank and they wouldn't give me access to my money, or I had my money in the bank and they were charging me all of these ridiculous fees to access my money, and so much so that it just winded my balances down. Those individuals have a mistrust towards financial systems and are spreading their mistrust with the people that are close to them, as you would with any experience. Whether it's a good experience or a bad experience, you're going to go and you're going to tell the people that you talk to, the people that you're close to, the people that you care about, oh my God, I had an amazing experience with this product or service. Or, oh my God, I had a terrible experience with this product or service. I'll never use it again, and I don't want you to have the same experience, so I never want you to use it again. And those situations can spark a trauma, a financial trauma, that people choose not to engage with those services, with those systems. So I'll share a quick story. When in the summer of 2021, I was approached by a marketing agency, and the marketing agency offered to create this elaborate funnel for me to help me promote a product that I had through advertisements. They started spitting a bunch of numbers at me based off of the amount of dollars that I spent. The outcome would be this, and all we needed to do was follow this step-by-step custom plan to ultimately getting me all this money. What was happening in the background, however, is that in the summer of 2021, I had just left my job. So I was starting off as a brand new entrepreneur. I needed to figure out very quickly how I was going to make enough money to live. And so this opportunity falls into my lap, seemingly just out of the heavens, to go out and to make this money off of something that I had already created. And so I was a little hesitant at first. Just like, I don't think this is the best financial decision for me right now. I really shouldn't be spending this money when I should be focused on how do I increase my income. But I had access to credit. And of course I was hit with the line that, all of the salespeople try to hit you with. Well, you should invest in yourself, and this is an opportunity for you to make, do better for yourself, et cetera, et cetera. And I kept pushing. And eventually I said, you know what? It sounds like it makes sense. They offered me in writing a contract, and the contract covered basically all of the avenues that I could think of that would make this be a beneficial partnership. And so I signed on the line, and I handed over my credit card and I made the payment. Payment was significant to me. And then we start working together and they start telling me the different things that I need to do. They start creating scripts for me. They ask me to record these videos. They ask for all of these different assets that I have in terms of like photos and the link to the course and et cetera, et cetera. I give them everything that they ask for. And after the first month of working with them, I spent, not including the fee that I paid to work with them, in advertisement, over $1,000 and had 0 conversions. Like, what that means is nobody, it's like people saw my product being advertised and nobody bought it. And so I'm like, okay, well, is it my product that's the problem? Or is it that this, infallible science around this process is the problem? And so I started to push back. And the pushback included, some of the scripting. I was just like, that doesn't sound like me. I don't talk like that. That's not the language that I use. Like, that's not me. I'm not going to pretend to be somebody that I'm not. The elaborate videos that they wanted me to, have on a certain outfit and be in a certain location, and just like all of, these very crazy demands. And I'm like, yeah, that's not working. That's not going to work for me. And so I'm pushing back and I'm pushing back and I'm pushing back. And I'm like, I'm spending all of this money with you guys. It's not working. Why is it working? And they become combative. And so to make a long story short, we ended up not working together. They discontinued the agreement and they were in breach of a contract. And of course, I go and try to do my due diligence after the fact, to try to do my due diligence and finding out, how this business operates and has anybody made any complaints about them. And I make a complaint about them and try to get the Better Business Bureau involved and, looking for a resolution. Nothing. In order for me to get back the money that I spent on their service and on what the advertising was, I would have to take them to court, which would be an additional expense. So I'm going around, I'm asking my friends and my family, like, what should I do? And a bunch of people are just telling me, like, you know what, you just got to let it go. Just got to let it go. And so eventually that's what I ended up doing. I ended up letting it go, and I was out of the money that I had spent on this situation in a very sensitive, kind of delicate time for me financially. Why does this story matter? Because anytime a marketer comes into my email or my DMs on social media or reaches out to me and wanting to do work with me, my initial reaction is no. Completely turned off. I do not want to work with any marketers who have anything to do with paid advertisements, building me a funnel, anything that sounds similar to the experience that I had that was a negative experience that I lost money in. I'm completely turned off of. It's not because I'm not smart enough to understand that marketing allows for me to reach a greater audience, and more people, the more money that I spend, the more people I get in front of, and the more chances of my product being sold. It just simply means that I had a bad experience with this particular kind of professional, and that experience ruined it for other like professionals. When you extrapolate that experience over a group of people, over a period of time, and the collection of their lived experiences echoing throughout time and history and environments, culture. That's what's happening with financial systems and financial services specifically, and marginalized communities. People lost money, people lost time, people felt powerless, and in their inability to reclaim their power through finances, they have opted out of participating in these systems. It's actually a self-preservation technique that would really be considered intelligent, right? You touch the hot oven, you burn yourself, I don't want to touch that hot oven anymore. And so when we have these conversations, we have these dialogues where we're chastising people for poverty, we're chastising people for not participating in these systems by calling them dumb or stupid or saying that they need more education, they need to be beat over the head with more education, without taking into account that an experience that they had either directly or indirectly that somebody that they've interacted with can recount a time where they did what they were being asked to do and it resulted in a negative impact to them, and they went and they shared that with their friends and their family, then it is reasonable and justified for those people not to participate in these systems. And so the work of a financial educator like myself, or somebody who's holding their hand through the process, through financial coaching or through financial planning, or any of the other financial disciplines where there is a reliance on financial products and financial services and financial systems, one of the parts of the equation in their success and our success is helping people to overcome some of that financial trauma that I talked about earlier, without triggering them, or by triggering them and providing a solution to that trigger, by showing them how this works, where there is risk, where risk has been removed, what avenues they can take to address the concerns that they have around potentially losing it all. And it's a delicate balancing act to make. However, we have to remove from our minds and remove from our vocabularies that it is just purely an issue of education. And certainly for some, it could be education, right? If my grandmother had a negative experience with a financial system, and because of that negative experience, she shared with my dad that I had this negative experience with this financial system, don't ever touch it, don't ever approach it. And my dad never had a negative experience with the financial system because he listened to my grandma, but he came to me and said, hey, this is bad, don't ever touch it, don't ever engage with it. Not because I had a negative experience, but because your grandmother had a negative experience. And then I choose not to engage with this financial system because my grandmother had the experience that she shared with my dad, that he shared with me. And the financial system has improved in a way that disallows for what it is that my grandmother experienced to occur again. Then it might become an issue of education around how that financial system has improved, not necessarily on how to engage or how to manage my finances through that financial system, because there are alternatives. Culturally, there are alternatives to things like saving, to the management of spending. But there are still people who are very manual about writing things down and accounting out of their shoebox or underneath their mattress or in the drawer or between people. There are people who are engaged in cultural saving practices between members of their community. And so part of the job as a financial educator, as a financial practitioner, whether that be in a product or a service, is to educate on how these systems have changed and help guide people through their traumas, their resistance, their non-participation in these systems, not from a place of I'm smarter than you, I'm better than you, I know more than you, but from a place of understanding that their decision or indecision to engage is based or rooted somewhere in trauma, and that they need the hand-holding to move through that trauma so that they can make better decisions for themselves that are aligned to their values and their goals. So I got carried away here today, and so there was not enough time for us to go over the case study, but when we come back, I will make it a point to introduce the case study at the beginning of the show, and that will be a cadence that we keep moving forward. If you have any case study examples, any experiences or examples that you are dealing with financially, definitely feel free to reach out. Let us know, and I'll be happy to talk through those, kind of consider it like a live coaching, consulting session. And I look forward to bringing you more of this information on a regular basis as we finish out this season. So this has been another episode of Financially Irresponsible. I'm your host, Rakim Sabri, and until next time.
ours warm at Jaws Pawn, and we're stocked full of treasures. Big or small, we buy it all. We buy and sell fast rides, power tools, vintage guitars, and so much more. Walk the plank in style with our fine jewelry, diamonds, and watches. Plus, we have a huge selection of the latest video games, including the new PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. Jaws Pawn, conveniently located on Meriden-Waterbury Turnpike in Southington and West Main Street in New Britain.
I'm your host, Kurt Barwis. Today, I have a very special guest, Dr. Andrew Lim.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Veterans Corner. My name's Chuck Wooden.
Decision for ourselves for this week, if we want to be made well.
Hi, welcome to the crack of dawn. It's Dawn Lombardi. I'm starting the painting. It's going to be the cliffs with some water. Love it.
He took me on the sets of Lost in Space, Batman.
Everybody has a story. What's yours? Until next time.